For Session Update, I'm Shannon Loehrke. Minnesotans wonder how much longer they'll be able to get on a plane using their current driver's licenses. A deadline for compliance with the Federal Real ID Act has been extended until January of 2018, but current law prohibits the state from working towards meeting those requirements. Joining me today to discuss Real ID is Senator Warren Limmer. Thanks for joining me today, Senator Limmer.
I'm glad to be here.
So, just to be clear, Minnesotans can purchase an ID for an additional $15 that is in compliance.
That is a good point to start from.
Okay.
Minnesotans can buy an enhanced driver license provision for their driver license. It costs $15. You have to bring in some proof of citizenship or a birth certificate. That's the beginning elements of Real ID.
Okay.
And it'll be on your driver license either through an encrypted chip or a magnetic stripe on the back. I don't think that technology has been perfected yet, but it's certainly there as an option in the future. But and the other thing that I want to make sure people know is that they can board airplanes until 2018.
Right.
So we don't need to overrun our legislative offices saying you must do something until we begin to scrutinize it a little bit.
So I've read a lot of concerns, both from lawmakers and from the public, about Real ID. What are some of your concerns?
My concerns are, first, the process that Real ID began, how it began in Congress. In 2005, Congress passed the Real ID bill, which would require every state to have a uniform technological card, and then the states print their driver license print on it. And it would be a uniform access point, a digital access point for the federal government. The information on that could include, or would include, your birth certificate or proof of citizenship, among other things. And every state in the country would have access to Minnesota's records, as we would have access to theirs. Now, there's a conflict in law. Minnesota highly protects. We're a very strong privacy state, and we protect that data from being distributed to anyone else in our state or outside of our state. The federal government requires we can share that information with anyone we choose in any other state in the union. That violates our privacy law. And if they in turn did something wrong with that information, we have no way to enforce our privacy law in protecting our citizens once that information goes beyond our borders. The other thing about it is we're creating a centralized database that can be expanded at any time by Homeland Security. When Real ID was passed, now keep in mind it was passed in the dead of night, 2:30 in the morning in Congress by a simple amendment. There was no committee scrutiny, there was no committee consideration, no discussion. It was just brought forward as an amendment on the floor of the House and later adopted in its entirety by the Senate. It didn't even have a roll call vote on the amendment. But it is such a sweeping change in our driver license laws. It's a federal intrusion into what we should consider via the 10th Amendment as a responsibility we do, not the federal government. But regardless of how it was passed in Congress, now Homeland Security wants us to quickly pass the Real ID provisions as quickly as we can. And we were rather surprised in January that they now have extended it to 2018.
Right. Well, currently Minnesota can't even speak of the Real ID because of a law in 2009, which you were part of.
Yep. We did that for a reason.
What was the reason?
The reason is in 2009, we had 200 of the 201 legislators all supporting my bill as we joined 32 other states to say no to the federal government regarding Real ID sanctions. Since then, one by one, they've been picked off by the federal government and threatened with, we will refuse to have your citizens board airplanes if you don't bend to our will.
Right.
I have a little resistance just about that type of way of laws
because they're
being
strong-arming the
We
state.
had no discussion in Congress. It was passed without a roll call vote. Now they want to force us and bend our arms to bend the knee to the federal government. All in violation of Minnesota's existing privacy laws.
Right.
And so I know that this legislature will more than likely vote for some kind of way to pass it in the future, probably this session. Even though we have 2 years to do it,
right.
they will want to get this off the table and behind them at some point, probably this session.
So yeah, I mean, that was my question is, do you think it will be repealed this session? And then how can you move forward from there?
Yeah, I think it will be passed, and then we don't need to progress any further because it was passed.
Right.
But getting back to the reason why the agencies should not discuss it, we in 2009, when we had almost unanimous support of staying away from the federal government, we wanted to make sure that the legislature, not the bureaucrats, not the administration, not rulemaking that's outside of the public discussion, once again, just like Congress, we wanted to make sure that we, the office holders who are responsible to the people back home, are held accountable to making that decision. And if it's a good idea, it's a good idea, but let's keep it on the public record so the public knows who's responsible for including Minnesota in the Real ID program.
Besides lack of privacy or the privacy issue, are there any other unintended consequences that you fear?
Well, there is, and namely in the federal law of Real ID, it is written into the federal law that the Homeland Security Director, whoever he or she may be in the future, can have the single authority to expand the function and use of the Real ID digital platform whenever they want. Congress is out of it. Once again, Congress is out. There will be no voice of the people as represented through the action of Congress, who represents all of the people across the United States. They will be out of it, and Homeland Security will be in. Keep in mind, Homeland Security Director is a political appointment of the White House and not a representative of the public. And so we have to be very careful about the process that we follow when we write laws. Accountability is vitally important on this type of issue.
Do you know, I'm just curious, do these requirements hold forth for all state-issued IDs or just for driver's licenses? So people who don't drive, if they have just a state-issued ID, does it still have to have that in order for them to board a plane?
It will be applied to all state driver licenses or identification cards. We print those for people who don't drive but still need some form of government recognized identification card.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be much more to come on this topic, and I'm very grateful that you were able to stop by today. Thank you, Senator Limmer.
Thank you.